Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, a podcast about the Saints, otherwise known as the team where everyone seems to get hurt and stay hurt. Well, that might be a little too harsh, but I guess harsh is what we are when it comes to Saints injuries these days. And so we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Kendre Miller. We're going to talk about Dennis Allen not seeming to be a big fan of Kendre Miller these days. And we're going to get into that. We're going to call it the rundown segment, but it's going to be mostly about injuries. It's going to be talking about who's back, who is contributing, who is participating, and who is not participating, and if that's concerning or not as we head into the final week of the preseason and a showdown with the could-have-had Tajay Spears-led Titans. Now, we'll get into that first segment. We'll do that. Second segment, we're going to be talking, okay, who has the most on the line in this final preseason game? There's obviously several players that could either make or miss the roster based on this week, right? That's just how it works. It's a production business. Have you produced? So we're going to talk about, in the second segment, we're going to look at the offense, a new position battle that I'm sure is going to be interesting to a few people at the very least. You know, wide receivers, running backs, the whatever positions might be up for grabs. We're going to dive in, list a couple of players who could get themselves a roster spot with a big performance, or who has the most to lose with a bad performance. We'll talk about that. Final segment, we will look at the defense and special teams. Yes, we'll talk about Charlie Smyth. I don't want to spend the entire first segment talking about Charlie Smyth, but you should know he did make a 65-yard field goal in front of fans on Tuesday at Tulane at Yeoman Stadium, and he's probably going to have a chance to do it again at the Caesar Superdome in front of fans again. They're going to have another open practice on Friday. Fans are invited, and it's going to be a Charlie day. No one kicked today, and I think the reason being is you'd like to see him kick in the Superdome. It's one of the few things that you haven't gotten to see yet, and it's a pretty important aspect of being a Saints kicker. I do think there's a question there in terms of I've seen him kick inside one time. And that doesn't mean he hasn't kicked inside, but I've seen him kick inside one time, and it was against the Arizona Cardinals. Otherwise, it's been all outside and in some pretty decent wind. And for an Irish guy, you'd imagine that he's pretty comfortable in some steep wind. So we're going to talk about that. But first things first, let's talk about the injuries. So guys who we had not seen throughout camp finally coming back in Juwan Johnson, tight end, came off the PUP list this week, and I think he looks good. I think he's moving around as well as I can recall seeing him move around. He's highly motivated, and we'll see. Hopefully this can be the year that we thought was loading for him last year. And we got a chance to talk to him after Tuesday's practice. He didn't participate in team drills, but he was there for everything else. Wednesday, he got a little bit more work in, and Thursday, today, finally got involved in team reps. Looks good. Looks like a guy who can impact this offense. So we'll see. But here's just a couple quotes from him as he was talking about that, you know, the process for him.
They've been really good with me. They've been really patient. I've been pushing the envelope a little too much to be fair. Run around a little bit too much, but we've been really good. It's been good to finally get back. I don't think I was meant to, practice in California, so I think it was just meant for me to come here, show the fans a little something. It's good to be back, run around, catch the ball. It's truly been a lot, but, we're here now.
How close is this to what your original target date was?
Ahead of schedule. Yeah. I mean, I already knew that, once I got the surgery, I was going to be back faster than anticipated. If you give me 13 weeks, I'm going to be back in 8. If you gave me 8 weeks, I was going to be back in 4. And I think that's more so of a mindset thing. I think some people take the date as in, this is when I'm going to be back, but I always push the envelope. I think it's more of a mental thing than anything physical. When you believe you can do something, you're going to be able to do it.
The injury or the need for surgery came as a surprise? Is that?
No.
You didn't, oh.
No. Obviously, it was a surprise that I even had a fracture. I think it was more surprising that it happened. I had no idea that it happened. I was practicing pretty much all of OTA with it. And then, one day I was just kind of sore and wanted to check it out. Thought it was sprained, but it actually ended up being fractured. So it was a need for surgery. It was the fastest way possible, the safest way possible. And I'm back out here not missing any time from the season, so I'm really happy about it.
Oh, you can't be specific. But.
Yeah. Honestly, it's not really about the system. It's really mental. I think too many people put too much pressure on the football aspect and it being physical, and it's not. Everything about it is physical. Like, I'm in NFL, like, I can catch the ball, I can block, I can do all these certain things. And so once you put any doubt in your mind, you're already behind the 8 ball. And a lot of people in the NFL, they don't have it up here mentally. And when you have it there mentally, you can do, I know it sounds like cheesy, but you can do anything. Like, we're here for a reason. All these guys are here for a reason. And the only thing that separates guys from being good and great is mentally.
What's something in that mentality that stands out to you?
So good to hear that from Juwan, and hopefully he can deliver on that going forward. He also has a pretty funny quip about, he has a cut-ups package with about 200 clips from either practice or the game that to kind of watch and kind of motivate himself as he was going through rehab. And it's the title of that cut-ups package is "I'm Him," because he's him. Right. And so we'll see if that manifests into something this season. I do think that he is one of the weapons on this offense that actually give it some teeth, because he's a guy who you should be able to target early in routes. He's a guy you should be able to target over the middle of the field. Right. He should be a release valve who can run after the catch. So we'll see how that goes. Either way, it's good to have him back, because I'm not a huge fan of the depth behind him. Dallin Holker, we haven't gotten to see as much as we wanted to. He suffered a sprained ankle prior to week 2 of the preseason, hasn't practiced this week. I would be surprised if he's out there on Sunday. We'll see, right? If it might be a situation where, hey, you're going to want to battle through this, because if not, it's hard to put you on the roster without seeing you out there. So we will see. Other guys, Alvin Kamara missed the final week out in Irvine. I'm starting to wonder if maybe he got an early trip home, but I don't have any evidence to support that. Whatever. It just seems, the timing of it seems odd that, he missed that entire week, came back on Tuesday. No more back stiffness to talk about. He was limited on Tuesday, participated more on Wednesday. He looked like a full participant the last 2 days in terms of team reps. So that's a good sign. Puaga is another guy who kind of got ramped back in slowly. We did see him taking first team reps today. Looks good. Looks ready to play. I would be surprised if we don't see him on Sunday if he's healthy enough to play, because he didn't get reps in week 2, and I need him to get reps. Like, I feel good about Tally and where he's at, but where he's at is a rookie left tackle, and I need him to get those reps. I need him to make whatever mistakes he's going to make, or at least as many of them as possible in these games in the preseason, so that we're not saying, well, that drive would have worked, but there was a rookie mistake on the left tackle. So we'll go from there. Pete Werner, Paulson, Adebo also back, also getting action in team drills. So that kind of leaves you with just one more injury that you're looking at in terms of starter, and this is concerning. And that's Marshawn Lattimore, still dealing with a hip issue. We have not seen him. I did see him at the facility today. He is working off to the side, but man, it's frustrating to not have him out there this close to the season. And you have to start wondering, okay, what if he's not available to go week 1? Where do you look? Do you move Alontae Taylor outside? I'm not a huge fan of that scenario, because we literally just had a season where he started working outside in camp and then moved into the slot, and he never really felt comfortable in either position because he wasn't working at either position exclusively. Now we finally have a scenario where we feel like, hey, we're going to throw him in the slot. He's going to own that position. He's going to work on it. He's going to improve, and we're going to see how it goes. And then that's the year we put him outside. I don't like that. Kool-Aid McKinstry would be my first option to take over in that outside role, but he has a knee injury. Sounds like he's going to be back early in the season. It sounds like he won't miss week 1, or at least the expectation is that he'll be available for week 1. But how do you know? Like, you can't gamble on that. You need to have someone ready in case you don't get him out there. So is it Rico Payton? Is it Rajon Wright? Is it Shamar John Charles? Is it the new guy, Joejuan Williams, former second-round pick? Big guy, 6'3", 180 pounds. So you have some options there. We'll talk about that more in the defense. But the outside corner position is the one that I have the most questions about on this roster. We've seen a lot from linebackers. We've seen a lot from the depth cornerbacks with those guys out. But the linebacker position, I feel like, hey, we know what we're going to get. And you feel like the depth there is a strength. I think if you end up throwing a guy like Rico Payton out there to start, you're just asking the other team to attack him. And he's been attacked. He's handled it well in the preseason, but this is the preseason. Moving on, Kendre Miller. It doesn't seem like Dennis Allen is a particularly big fan of Kendre Miller these days. And you understand why, right? You understand the frustration, and it's not new frustration. We know going into camp, Deuce McAllister has been saying this all offseason, that this team has been frustrated with what they feel like is a lack of accountability and effort in terms of making sure you are ready to play, making sure that your body is where it needs to be, and maybe, working through a little discomfort, right? Working through a situation that maybe, you don't feel 100%, but you gotta fight through it. You gotta play. That's part of the game. You got to be able to do it. Now there are levels, right, to everything, but I don't think that this team is particularly thrilled that you get into camp and you pull a hamstring on the first set of individual drills, which I think to any rational observer, you look at it and say, you weren't ready. Like, clearly something wasn't right. Did you not prepare correctly? Did you not hydrate correct? Something went wrong, and we still have not seen him back. I don't know if it's a situation that you can repair. Personally, I think he's going to end. I've said this. I've been saying this for a couple weeks now. Personally, I think he's going to start the season on IR. He's going to be one of your two. Declare them for IR in advance so that you don't have to carry them onto the roster. You can just start with them on IR and they could still come back after 4 weeks. Because here's the thing, even, in that situation, you might look at it and say, like, a guy like Nick Saldiveri, for example, also out with an injury. If he's back in week 3, I feel comfortable playing him in week 3 if I had to. If Kendre comes back week 3 and is ready to play, I don't know if I'm comfortable playing him because I don't think he's picked up the offense. I don't think he's ready to play. And, this is going to be the clip that everyone kind of seized on with Dennis Allen. And I know that because the tweet I sent out with that quote went viral. So let's hear it.
Honestly, I get that question a lot. I don't, all I can go off of is what I've been able to evaluate. And quite frankly, since we drafted him, there hasn't been a whole lot of new information other than what I've seen, what I saw on the college tape, because he hasn't been available, and so, and for whatever the case may be, but it's hard to make that evaluation. So, hopefully we can get him out here and have an opportunity to, evaluate where he's at. But it certainly, certainly makes it a lot more challenging. That's for sure.
Is that hard to do too? His new system, you don't necessarily know if he can't evaluate what he's picked up, what he knows, what he can do. Is it worse right now given that circumstance?
Yeah, I got no idea.
Yeah.
Right? I think he injured his hamstring in the first individual drill of training camp, and I haven't seen anything of him. So he's talented. I know he's talented, but I don't know if he can learn the system. I don't know if he can pick up the system because I haven't seen him out there. So,
yeah, and that's some pretty harsh words, right? Like, you're not pulling punches. I've seen a lot of reactions to that, like, and a lot of it is, okay, I already didn't like Dennis Allen, and now this pissed me off even more. I think the majority of the people around the team, the majority of the people who pay close attention to the team understand the situation. And while this is kind of a harsh statement to make, I don't think that anyone's looking at this and saying he's completely out of line here. This is unreasonable. It's just a frustrating situation, and you got to figure it out. I think that I come at it from a different perspective of like, and Foster Moreau talked about this today, and he kind of played the middle ground of like, everyone's situation is different. Every health situation is different. He's not talking about Kendre specifically, but there's not a ton of resentment in that room towards people who might take a little longer to come back from injury. Like, everybody has their own stuff that they're dealing with. Foster himself played through a pretty significant ankle injury last year, right? And he talked about that today, but that's not true for everybody. Every situation is different. That said, if I'm a player who's playing through a significant ankle injury and I see someone who doesn't seem to be willing to play through that, to commit to that in that same way, that's going to frustrate me. So I don't necessarily look at this as saying Dennis Allen is throwing somebody under the bus, and he kind of is. But at the same time, I want to make it clear that there is an expectation that everyone, has the same level of skin in the game, right? Like Cam Jordan was playing through multiple ankle sprains on the same ankle. He had to have surgery in the offseason. He didn't miss a game. Now, you can't compare everyone to Cam Jordan because Cam Jordan is a cyborg. He's not normal. But you do look at it and you say, dude, you are a second-year player in a new offense. You got to do something. I got to see something. And when it comes down to it, I don't know if that saves you a spot on the roster. Being a third-round pick from a year ago does not save you a spot on the roster. And it's going to become even more glaring this Sunday when Kendre's not out there, because he's not going to be out there, and Tajay Spears rolls into town, the guy that the Saints objectively should have drafted, right? When you look at it and you say, like, well, why didn't they? I think the scouting led them to Kendre. Now, it was a different offense then. But, I think the easy way out would have been, hey, let's just take Tajay. We like him. He's a hometown kid. He's going to get people excited. He's going to get some butts in the seats. They didn't do it. They didn't take the easy way out, and it's biting them now, right? I think they overthought the situation. And so it's only going to get more and more glaring. I don't know. I like Kendre. The funny thing is that, and my tweet that I sent out kind of went viral and people were picking up on it. I was like, it was weird. It was like it was circles of people that I do not typically deal with on social media. And I was like, why is it so popular in these circles? And it's because it got picked up by fantasy football people. And this is an aside, but it is kind of funny to watch fantasy football takes dissolve in real time. And I think what was happening is a lot of these fantasy football nerds were trying to come up with predictions and hot takes. Everyone needs to come up with hot takes. It's part of the game. You talk. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you guess right. Sometimes you guess wrong. And there's not a ton of research being done beyond I saw this and I like this and this is this. And so I think what happened is a lot of these fantasy football prognosticators have been telling people all offseason, go draft Kendre Miller in the 10th round, the 12th round. He's going to take over for Alvin. Alvin's falling off. Alvin's got nothing left in the tank, and Kendre is going to be that guy by week 6, and you're going to coast to your fantasy football championship because Kendre Miller is going to be the RB1 in this offense. That's what was happening, and I've seen examples of that already. And that's not going to be the case. It feels more likely that Kendre gets cut than Kendre is the RB1 this year. Now, things can change. Maybe there's a wake-up call of sorts going on. But one way or another, it's not a pretty situation for the Saints and Kendre Miller. We'll see how that goes. I don't think I just don't think it benefits anyone for them to cut him unless that relationship has completely dissolved. And he is taking very much offense to what Dennis is saying. And if that's the case, then maybe you do have to move on. Maybe you just have to start fresh, and good luck. See what you can do anything somewhere else. It's frustrating. It's frustrating, especially for a team and a roster that I would say needs young players. They need young playmakers. And he's been one of the more exciting playmakers since he's been here in terms of when he's been on the field. He's made big plays. The Saints had 2 30-plus yard plays from running backs in the 2023 season. They were both Kendre Miller, and they were both catch and runs. One was a screen against the Patriots. One, I believe, I don't know if it was a screen, but it was a check down against the Bears. That was the play he sprained his ankle on last year. So we'll find out. But man, it's not a pretty scene right now, and we'll see how that goes. I do think, but again, just to go back to that initial point, like if the idea is DA is going to lose the locker room by being a little too harsh about a guy not necessarily fighting through an injury, I don't think that's the case, because I think in the locker room, that would be perceived as I am putting up for all the players that I know are fighting through injuries. And there are several players in that locker room right now that are dealing with stuff, but know that getting on the field in the preseason is valuable to the point that they're going to fight through an injury to do it and put good tape out there. So we'll see how that goes. But that's just right now, that's a situation that you're going to have to watch and figure out. And, maybe by week 6, something's changed. But I don't know. It's tough to look at that situation and not see it as Jordan Mims is the guy behind Alvin and Jamal. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But one other note before we move on, Clint Kubiak, he's been a booth man. He's a booth man for the first 2 weeks of the preseason. there was a little bit of a failure, a little bit of a false start on my part before the week 2 game, because we had heard, Deuce had heard, and we were reporting that Clint was going to be on the sidelines for week 2 of the preseason. Now, I don't know. There was always a plan that Clint would get down on the sideline to call a game during the preseason. I think there was some level of issue with getting him down on the sideline for that game. And so that didn't happen. He called the week 2 from the booth. According to Clint, he's going to be down there for week 3. He's going to be on the field calling plays during the preseason finale against the Titans. We'll see how that goes. Like, I don't know if it's really a huge issue that he's not down there, as long as it's not an issue for his players, right? Like, if you're getting the amount of communication you need to get while routing it through John Benton, the offensive line coach, Andrew Janocko, the quarterback's coach, Keith Williams, the wide receivers coach, like, if you're getting enough through them, then I don't have a problem with him being up in the booth, because I think there is value in having an offensive play caller up in the booth and getting that instant feedback of being able to see not only what you're doing on offense, but what the defense is doing in terms of how it's reacting to you, right? Like, if you're on the sideline, you're looking at pictures on a tablet. You're not getting that immediately. How much time do you have to go through everything? You don't get that instant feedback. So, I don't have a problem with him being up in the booth if the team doesn't feel like it's impacting them in a negative way. So we'll find out. But this is what Clint had to say about, kind of that communication and why it's important.
Trust your coaches, going back to 2021, just trusting the guys around you and trusting your preparation, and a lot of great communication on the sideline and just using all your resources.
Do you take that into this experience and help you with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And just communicating that ahead of time with our coaches. Like, hey, I want to hear you guys on the headset. I want to hear what you're thinking. I want to over-communicate. I don't want crickets on the headset. So too much information is not a bad thing.
One of the things that some people have talked about with you in this offense in particular is the kind of everybody sounded like one message, whether it's you speaking or Janocko or John Benton. Is that something that you guys had to work on before you even started working with the players, or is that just kind of come naturally?
I think that's just kind of the expectation of since we came together as a staff. The expectation is to be on the same page as our players, and it's not always going to be perfectly that way, but that is something that we communicate to our players and something we stress as coaches, and because of that we got to spend a lot of time together and getting right in our film sessions before we go communicate to the players. I think it's important, because the players are giving us everything they have, and we have to give them a unified front.
All right, so we'll see. But you should see Clint on the sideline for this game. If you're in attendance, keep an eye out for him. I don't know exactly how big his play sheet is because I've never seen him holding it, but he will be down there. So keep an eye out for that. You can also keep an eye out for me because I will also be down there roaming the sideline for the first time this year, and I'm excited about that. And so that kind of leads us in to the next segment. So I'll wrap this up. Again, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is our final episode prior to the preseason finale. So I want to go through who has the most on the line. We're going to start with the offense. Then we're going to close with the defense and special teams. And yes, we're going to talk about Charlie Smith's big boot. And we will get into it. All right. Who dat? Subscribe. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is a podcast. We are talking about the New Orleans Saints and the Tennessee Titans preseason finale. Now, I'm not going to weigh you down with information from this week's practices. I don't want to, I think we've kind of reached a critical mass of how much of this stuff are we going to be talking about every day, this rep versus that rep. And, I think we've learned about as much as we're going to learn from these practices at this point, right? And remember, we don't see these practices during the regular season. Well, we see your games. So I think we've reached the point where the most information we're going to get in terms of a lot of these position battles is going to be on Sunday, and it's going to be in the game against the Tennessee Titans and who plays, who doesn't, who starts, who finishes, right? I don't know if you'll see Derek Carr. I kind of feel like you want to close out the preseason on a high note, and that's what you got in week 2 with that 16-play, 95-yard drive. You're not going to improve on that. Like, you're not going to come away from any possession feeling better than you do right now about that drive. So I think this game should be about the depth players and who's kind of filling out the roster spots at positions that you're not sure about, right? And so I think there's only one true starting position that's being battled for in camp right now and on the field right now for the offense, and that would be right tackle with Oli Udoh and Trevor Penning. The last 3 days of practice, we have seen, for the first time in camp, Oli Udoh and Trevor trading off sets. So you'll start with Trevor at right tackle and for the first team, and Oli will work with the second team. Then the next set of team drills, you'll start with Oli with the first team and Trevor with the second team, and vice versa until the end of the day. And that's just a good way to see, like, yeah, they're competing. We'll see how that goes. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case during the game because it's a little harder to pull off because you want some level of continuity. You don't want to pull a guy out of the game for a series and then put him back in because that doesn't really mimic what a game is like. And so I think what you're going to see is probably Trevor with the first team. And this will be kind of his final audition to earn that job. And then I would bet you get Oli with the second team. But we'll see. Maybe they do. Maybe they do kind of alternate and it goes from there. I don't know if you're getting a ton more out of Oli than you will out of Trevor, right? Like, I think there's this idea that because he's a veteran, he's definitely going to be better. And I do think that just having someone else on the field is going to make people feel better about the situation, even if he's not necessarily improving over what you would have. I do think that there's going to be a higher level of consistency with Oli, but you're going to have a lower ceiling. I think that's what the trade-off is, right? Like, it's a standard higher floor versus lower ceiling thing, because when Trevor sells, he sells hard, right? But he has the potential to develop into a high-end starter, and it's just a question of whether you think that he could ever possibly reach that potential. And you could say, I don't see that potential. But here's the thing. When you have a guy of his size and his athleticism, there is potential. And the question is, how much can you sacrifice on the path to getting to that? Because you're going to have to let him, because in order to get to that, you're going to have to let him play through struggles. That's the only way. Now, the question is, are those struggles going to be too much for this team to overcome? Because if they are, and you lose 10 games, then it won't really matter because you're blowing this thing to hell anyway. So that's where you got to figure out. But my read on that situation is you're probably going to still go with Trevor in week 1. And what this week is about is making sure that as you get into the season, if you find yourself having to make that decision, you know that you've at least gotten this guy ready to take over in Oli Udoh. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe they are really close to switching. I just don't see it. Because if you were that way, you would have done it prior to this week. Again, I think this is more about getting Oli reps and getting him ready so that if you get into week 2 or heck, even the second half of week 1, right? And Trevor is just not getting it done. And you're just like, he's going to get our quarterback killed. That this guy's at least ready to go in there. So we'll see. The interesting thing is I'm pretty sure Arden Key is going to be out there for week 3 of the preseason. And if you recall week 1 of the 2023 season, Arden Key is the guy who ate Trevor's lunch. I don't think he got credit for 3 sacks, but it sure felt like he got 3 sacks. I think one of the issues was they took away his sack fumble and turned it into an incompletion. So that definitely didn't help his cause. And I think most people who were watching that game felt like it was a sack fumble. Only Saints fans who were watching through black and gold colored glasses would say that wasn't a sack fumble, but hey, they won the game. So either way, Trevor's going to get to go up against Arden Key again. And, it would be very fitting if that's the reason you end up going with Oli and you're like, yeah, Trevor, this is a good litmus test for has he improved at all from last year? And if he hasn't, then maybe you do make that change. So we'll see. But either way, it's certainly notable information that Oli is getting those reps, and we'll see how that goes. From there, we really saw a big day for wide receivers today. You're seeing a few guys who are competing for roster spots get out there and get a lot of reps. Mason Tipton is still not back in full. We got him back to practice today. He did individual work, but he did not work into team drills. And hopefully Friday he can get back into those and potentially put himself in a position where he can play on Sunday. Because I do think you need to see something from him. I don't know if you can make a roster based on solely preseason practice hype. I think you have to show something. Because putting Mason on this roster is going to make things complicated. Putting Mason on this roster is going to mean you have to make a cut somewhere else, whether it's A.T. Perry, another guy I think has a lot to prove, whether it's Stanley Morgan, who I think has a lot of special teams upside, right? Whether it's one of your linebackers, whether it's one of your running backs, whether it's the extra tight end that you might want to keep, another guy who's dealing with an injury. So we'll see. But on that list for me, A.T. Perry, Bub Means, Equinemius St. Brown, Mason Tipton. And I don't have Stanley Morgan on there because I think if Stanley Morgan makes this team, it's not going to be because he didn't show well in the wide receiver race. It's going to be because you feel really good about him on special teams. And I still kind of feel like, based on what I've seen, that you need that guy. You need that special teams ace. You need that standout special teamer. And to me, I think he's him. From there, I look at Jordan Mims and James Robinson, and I think you would put Jordan Mims at the top of that conversation right now. But I do think that we probably haven't talked about James Robinson enough in camp because all he's been is really solid. He's just been a solid running back. Now, pass protection, I don't think either of these guys has been a star in that part of the game. Jordan, I would argue, has been better. And I think I would bet Jordan makes this roster again after you put Kendre on IR, which I think is going to be the case. I would bet Jordan makes this roster and James ends up on the practice squad. There was one rep in the game the other day that James just got walked back into the quarterback. I think Spencer Rattler was the quarterback. He just got blown up. And it's those are the reps that you're going to see on tape and you'll be like, for your third string running back, I need better than this. I can't see that. And I don't think James has the upside athletically to make a strong push, but it would be cool to see one of those guys really have a big day. And I think that would really cement the roster spot for Jordan if he can have a big day. If he can't, then maybe that opens the door for James, who I think he had a solid day against the 49ers. He's had a solid camp. I don't think you have any issue with James Robinson other than the fact that you might want a younger guy with a little more upside. But he is a guy that's had a 1,000-yard rushing season in the NFL. He's been around the block a few times, so maybe you're looking for a more experienced player. I don't know. Both those guys have a lot on the line. Next one, Jake Haener. And I'm not saying Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. I am saying specifically Jake Haener because I think Spencer's getting kept on the roster either way. I think Spencer's development is going to go well beyond, he's the backup quarterback this year or he's not. Right? If you're keeping 3 quarterbacks on the roster, on the active roster, it's because Jake is your backup quarterback and Spencer is your depth guy who is developing as a rookie in the NFL. And I have no problem with that. Now, what Jake has to do, and I think he has done a pretty good job of that to this point, is prove that I am the best option as the backup anyway. So put me in there and don't worry about it. I'm your guy. I think neither guy had a great day against the 49ers. Jake's was slightly better just in terms of how he was able to lead that offense, particularly on that final drive, even though it didn't end up in the end zone. But, today I thought Jake had a fantastic day. He was hitting anticipation throws. He was hitting skinny posts down the field. He hit James Robinson on a wheel route, right? Jordan Mims had a really nice... Yeah, there was one funny moment where they were throwing individual drills to the sideline. Right. And there was a assistant coach catching the ball. And at one point he kind of waved him to take a couple steps to the left. And then either threw the worst ball I've ever seen a quarterback throw, or he intentionally threw a ball directly at the media. And I am willing to bet money that he did it intentionally. I think it was, I made this reference several times and I don't think most people have gotten it, which is weird because it's one of the most, highest grossing movie franchises of all time. But if you've ever seen The Hunger Games, there's a scene where, Katniss, the main character, is trying to show what she can do to the people that are going to judge her and give her a grade. And they're not paying attention. They're eating snacks or whatever. So she shoots an arrow at them and it freaks them all out. Right. I kind of feel like that's what Jake was doing. I think he was why is no one paying attention? And he threw a ball. And I don't know if he was aiming for me specifically, but if I hadn't moved out of the way, it would 1,000% have hit me in the face. And it was a rocket. He didn't slip out of his hand. It was anyway, so it's just a funny moment. I have no information beyond that. I'm curious. I'm going to have to ask him the next time we talk to him whether that was intentional. But anyway, it's going to be interesting. And I just think Jake has a lot on the line because, again, if you can't prove you're that guy and you do go with Spencer Rattler, then what is the outlook for Jake Haener? I think you probably just try to put him on the practice squad and you see how that goes. Maybe he gets claimed, maybe he doesn't. If Jake wants an opportunity in the NFL this year, he's going to have to earn it this year. It's not going to be handed to him. That said, I think when you're talking about a competition that involves a rookie player, a tie goes to the more senior player because I don't want to put a rookie in a scenario that I don't know if they're ready for just for the sake of putting a rookie in that scenario. If I don't have to do it, I'm not going to do it, right? If I have a better option or if I have an option that I feel more comfortable with, that's what I'm going to go with because the problem is once you put a rookie in that situation, you are committed. You cannot backtrack and say, oh, well, we put him in and then he really struggled, so we pulled him out. No, you've committed to that. Because doing anything else will just destroy everything you've been developing. So we'll see how that goes. But I think Jake has a lot on the line. And then finally, Dallin Holker, I think he does have a good bit on the line in the sense of, man, I really need to see you out there. Like, I think they're going to keep him on the roster. I do think they're going to try to keep him on the roster. But what if you get down to the wire and you're like, man, I have to make a hard cut here. And I'm just not sure who that's going to be. It'll probably be the guy who wasn't played. And I don't think that his injury is particularly significant. I think that he is going to be back pretty quickly. I don't know if he's going to be back on Sunday. And then the question becomes, have you done enough to merit that roster spot? And I just don't know. So, he's a guy that has a lot on the line, and I don't know if he's going to be able to fight for it or not. And that's a little frustrating. And it would open the door for a guy like Michael Jacobson, right? For a guy like Mason Fairchild, who I thought had a pretty solid game against the 49ers, who's really the only option. Now you have Juwan, that kind of changes that equation a little bit because you're not as concerned about whether you'll get Juwan back, right? Like if Juwan's injury had lingered and you're looking at it like, okay, what happens if he's not ready? Then, yeah, you probably do keep Dallin either way. Now with some confidence in Juwan and knowing you have Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau, I do think that opens up some options for you. So we'll have to see. But that's the last guy on my list of, okay, who has the most on the line? There's obviously more players competing for spots. Lucas Patrick and the field is a good example of like, okay, I think Lucas has already got that job kind of lined up, or at least he's in position to win that job. But what if he falls flat on his face? What if he gets hurt? Who goes in after that? A guy like Landon Young, I think is in the running. Kyle Hergel is in the running, a UDFA out of Boston College, but we will have to see. Either way, let's wrap up that segment. That was the offensive players with the most on the line heading into the final week of the preseason. We are less than a week away from 27 of these players on the roster getting cut, getting sent to Timbuktu, some getting sent to the list at the bottom of the page, which is the practice squad. But either way, we're going to learn a lot on Sunday. So, without further ado, let's move on to the defense right after these ads. Inside Black and Gold. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. This is the final segment of today's podcast, and we're breaking down the players with the most on the line heading into the final preseason game that is going to be at 1 p.m. Central, which is a weird start time, at the Caesars Superdome against the Tennessee freaking Titans. The fighting Will Levis's, the fighting Tyjae Spears's, the fighting used to be the fighting Derrick Henry's. I run out. I don't know a lot of the other players on their roster, but that's really not what's important. What's important is the Saints side of the equation, at least as far as the Saints are concerned. So that's what we're going to talk about. This segment, we're going to break down the players with the most on the line for defense and special teams. And we're going to talk first about special teams because there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of talk around Charlie Smyth, the Charlie boy, as Lou Hedley calls him. I watched him again ahead of the Arizona Cardinals game, knock through a 66-yard field goal. I think it was tweeted about. People talked about it. What they didn't talk about was that he missed a 55-yarder and a 52-yarder right before that. And I think that in a nutshell is a huge part of this conversation is consistency. And I look at it and say, okay, who has a lot on the line? Blake Grupe and Charlie Smyth objectively have a lot on the line in terms of, like, this is still a competition, I think. That said, it's hard for me to see Charlie winning it. And that's not to say I don't really like Charlie Smyth. There's just a lot that goes into this conversation. So let's just get into it, because first things first is the separation between these two guys is not nearly as wide as you would think it would be. And I think that's why you look at it and you say, okay, this is a lot more intense of a competition than, I don't know, I expected it to be, right? So I misread that situation. So maybe I'm misreading this situation too. Either way, you look at the numbers. Blake Grupe has attempted 76 kicks in training camp and the preseason games. He has hit 64 of them. That's good for 84.2%. You'd want it better. What I will say is, when you're out in Irvine, you're on this field where you're not protected by anything, and you just have this very consistent left to right wind, not something you're going to deal with a ton in actual games, because even in outdoor games, you're typically going to be protected by the stadium itself. So you're not going to get this kind of low side wind. You're going to get kind of a swirling wind that you have to play. So it's kind of a weird situation. I think that is something that Blake struggled with at times. But I do think it kind of played into Charlie Smith's hand a little bit, because that's just something that he's used to. And I think he handled it pretty well. So Charlie has gone 57 of 69. That's 82.6%. Like I mentioned, I think the kicking competition is going to come down to the final practice at the Superdome. And so Charlie's next 7 kicks, or however many kicks it is, I think he's going to get 7 attempts tomorrow. If he makes all 7 of those, both guys will finish 64 of 76. Now, he's usually good for 1 miss of practice, and you'll go from there. But the 65-yard kick, the bomb leg, I think has really kind of caught people's attention, and for good reason. Like, I get it. That's exciting. If you can make it consistently from 65 yards, that's a game changer. And you can start kicking field goals from the 48-yard line or the 47-yard line. That's nuts. That's crazy, especially in an end-of-game scenario. It really opens things up. That being said, how many times a year would you actually do that? Would you actually consider doing that? Maybe once, maybe more likely once every 2 years. I think Justin Tucker has the current NFL record at 66 yards. He did it in 2023. It kind of like limped over the bar. It actually hit the crossbar and bounced over. In Charlie's case, the other day, he hit the kicking net. Like, he cleared it. It probably would have been good from 70. But again, remember, and this is the important thing to remember. The ability to make a 65-yard kick does not mean you're going to make every 65-yard kick. So you'll almost never attempt it on just a regular drive, because what happens if you do miss? Is 3 points worth potentially giving someone the ball at the 50-yard line? If you miss that kick, you are in a scenario where you give up that kick. Like, that's what makes it weird. Now, in an end of game scenario where you only have to get to the 47-yard line to give yourself a legitimate shot at either a tying field goal or a go-ahead field goal, yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. That's the only scenario. And you need your kicker to do a lot more than just that. So just for perspective, when Dennis Allen was asked about it, here's what he said.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, it's nice to know, that you can knock one in from 65. I think we kicked 6 in that deal, and I think he was 5 of 6, if I'm not mistaken. So I thought he kicked the ball really well in the practice environment. And look, he's a talented player. And yeah, I think being able to make one from 65, I think that's great. But we're not going to attempt a ton of 65-yarders. So it's really, to me, what are we really getting inside of 50? In the consistency in that range, because that's where a majority of the kicks are going to come.
Have you seen him turn a corner at all with that?
Yeah, look, I think he's improved from where he was when he first got here to where he's at now. I think he's improved significantly. There's still, some consistency that we've got to see, but yeah, I like some of the things I'm seeing from him for sure.
Yeah, and like people can say all they want, like I hate Dennis Allen, whatever, and I understand, I get it. There's times where I feel like he has the personality of a toad, but what I will say for Dennis is a lot of times he's honest. Like he's not doing the coach speak thing there. He's telling you the truth, which is we're not going to overvalue a guy who can make a 65-yard kick that we are almost never going to attempt. It's going to come down to who does better, who are we more confident in from 50 yards and in, because we know both of these guys can kick it from 50 plus. Blake can kick it from 60. We've seen him make a 60-yard kick in camp. He went 7 of 8 the other day, and the only miss was a 61-yarder that hit the left upright about, a third of the way up. So, like, he had plenty of distance. He had plenty of leg from 61 yards. So he can also make it from a mile out. So the question becomes, who do you feel more confident in kicking a game-winning PAT, right? A game-winning 38-yarder, a game-winning 42-yarder, a game-winning whatever. Right? Who do you feel like is going to make a higher percentage of their kicks from the 40 to 50 yard line, from the 30 to 40 yard line? And I think right now you have to look at that and say Blake, right? One thing that I think people are undervaluing is the level of unknowns that come with a guy who has literally never kicked in an NFL game. He's got one kick to his credit in a preseason game. That's it. And I think that's going to benefit you when you inevitably, I think, waive him and try to put him in that extra practice squad spot that comes for the international player, because no other team is going to commit to that being their starting kicker either. Because look at it this way, if you're a scout, if you're a special teams coach and you walk into the GM's office and say, we should sign this guy to be our starting kicker, and they're like, oh, let me see some kicks. I'm like, all right, here's the one from the preseason against the Cardinals. Look at that, 37 yards. They tried to ice him right down the middle. And the GM will be like, nice. Okay, let's see another one. They'll be like, we don't have another one. What? Yeah, well, we have some pretty solid tweets from this last Tulane practice. Is that going to work for you? No, like that's just not going to be a commitment that a team makes, because if someone's going to claim Charlie, they would have to do it to make him their starter. He has to stay on their roster. They can't just claim him and sign him to their practice squad. So like they would have to claim him to be their starter, and I just don't think anyone's doing that. Now, the other way around, if you cut Blake, I do think he's getting claimed. And so that's where I land on it. And I think you go into this and you look at it and you say, okay, well, what was our metric? What were we looking for? And if one guy has made a higher percentage of his kicks inside the 50 and then you go with the other guy anyway, then you're kind of buying into the hype a little bit too much too. And keep in mind, this is Dennis Allen we're talking about. This is a special teams group that has clearly erred on the side of, I want to eliminate as many variables as possible. And there are inevitable variables that come with going with a kicker who's never kicked in an NFL game before. I had somebody say this is this year's Brandon Aubrey, right? The kicker for Dallas, who's making all these bomb kicks and for good reason, was fantastic last year. There's a difference. And the difference is Brandon Aubrey, who did kind of come out of nowhere, didn't kick in college, but he did kick for 2 years in the USFL and the UFL before coming to the NFL. Right? His UFL team was the Birmingham Stallions. They won back-to-back championships, and he was their kicker. So he had experience before he got to the NFL level, and at least you could look at that and say, hey, he's done this. The field goal posts are the same size. That's not going to be the case with Charlie. And I always kind of went into this saying, hey, this is a 2-year thing. This is a 2-year program for him. And this first year is going to be the year that you decide whether it's worth having that second year at all. And I think definitively he has proven that, yes, you should have that second year. And he's done so in a way that actually forced you to play this competition all the way out. And that's a great result for him. And so what would you be doing by putting him into that spot right now if he's not ready for it? If you're just saying, hey, we're just going to do it, then you're setting him up to fail. Because I think what people forget when they get really excited about a 65-yard kick is how insanely pull your hair out, burn the place down angry you're going to be if he has a run, if he goes to be like Brett Maher and misses 4 extra points in a game, because, we don't know. That's one of the things you don't know is what happens when he misses a kick. How does he react the next kick, right? And if you did end up in a scenario where he wasn't ready and you had to pull him and you had to bench him, you're not coming back from that. And you've created a situation that you can't redeem. So all that said, I think it's going to be Blake, but I'm not going to tell you it's going to be Blake. There's a chance that I am completely misreading this situation and they go with Charlie. And I would be thrilled if they went with Charlie because I'm a huge fan of Charlie's. I'm just telling you what I think is going to happen. Like, I would also love to see a guy go out there and knock a 65-yard field goal through during a game just because he can. And maybe that's where we are next year. But I think this year you're going to go with Blake and see what happens. And it's easy to forget this time last year, we were all groupies and we were all excited about this little tiny guy who was making these kicks and we had these fun stories. Now Charlie's the one with the fun story and we've all kind of forgotten about Blake. But that said, I don't know if Blake goes out there and blows a few kicks and creates a scenario where, man, if I don't trust him either, then I'm going to go with the guy that I think has more upside. But right now, I don't. I feel like I trust Blake. I feel like he's that guy. Anyway, we went way too long on that, and we'll go from there. And again, don't take this as me trashing Charlie. Understand that, like, I think, and I've said this over and over again, the best route for you as a team is to throw him in that international spot on the practice squad, have him available if and when Blake gets hurt or Blake struggles and you do need to go a different route. He's there. And if not, if Blake has a good year, then you go into next offseason feeling like now Charlie is ready to compete for that job from day one. And, that's where you're going to decide. Anyway, punter situation, another one. I thought Lou Hedley bounced back really well on Wednesday from the rough preseason game, and hopefully he can continue on that. At one point I watched him down 2 balls inside the 5. Rod Teamer and A.T. Perry made some really nice plays downing those balls, right? But the location was perfect. They popped up. I don't know. So that's the question is if you have someone who can field a kick, who can get down there and cover it, then you can kick some really incredible punts. If the only option you have is to have it check straight up and just hope it doesn't bounce the wrong way, then you're only going to be able to do so much. So punt and coverage is a combination. That said, he did not punt very well on last Sunday. So I'd like to see him go out there and punt a little better. Again, with both of these situations, I don't think that either guy has necessarily separated themselves. And when that's the case, I'm not going to err toward a young player who I don't really know what to expect from. I'm going to err toward the veteran player with who I have at least seen what he does and how he can do it. So, but either way, both those guys, Lou Hedley and Matt Hayball, other guys, starting jobs, only one real starting job on the line, and that's going to be Jordan Howden, Will Harris, John Abram, all competing for that strong safety spot. That's been the case throughout. I still think it's Will Harris. I think Jordan Howden, I don't want to say he's disappointed, but he definitely hasn't climbed up that ladder the way that I would have hoped, right? Like, you got to make a tackle at the goal line on 4th and 1 against their quarterback. You cannot, and especially when you have him lined up, like you got run through by Josh Dobbs. That's not good. So I would guess Will Harris is your starter week 1. We'll see. It's not going to be a strength, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. I really don't. I think this defense is going to be very good, and I don't think that your strong safety position is going to be the reason that you struggle if you struggle. I think this defense is going to be good all year. I really do. And we'll find out. I'm currently trying to figure out what my win total projection should be. And I don't know. I'm kind of waffling on dropping it a few games just because of the concerns I have with the offensive line. But it's not going to be because of the defense. I have very strong feelings about this defense being very good. Next up, linebacker depth. DeMarco Jackson, Khaleke Hudson, Monty Rice, and then in parentheses, Jalen Ford. And the parentheses are because Jalen Ford has not been on the field. I expect him to get cut. I think he's going to be another guy that is just a victim of not being able to be on the field. And that's okay. I think you put him on the practice squad, you continue to develop him, and you see what happens from there. But, I just don't know if he can do enough, if he's done enough, and if you can justify cutting other guys because he's a draft pick. right? So you look at that. Monty Rice has also been hurt the last few days. Hopefully he can get out there. Khaleke Hudson has been solid. If is he enough of an asset on special teams to keep around? It's the type of thing you can really show in these games. And then DeMarco Jackson. Now, the guy I don't have on this list is Anthony Orji because I think he's made the roster. Now, he could go out and struggle, and maybe that changes something to some extent, but I just feel like Anthony Orji is a guy you're keeping. And the question becomes, how many linebackers do you keep? Because you're keeping Demario Davis, Pete Werner, Willie Gay. And I think you're keeping Anthony Orji, and then I think you're keeping at least one more linebacker beyond that. Now, the thing with DeMarco Jackson, poorly timed injury today, right? He went down with a calf issue late in the practice. If that lingers into the season, then you're talking about, okay, it's a fringe roster spot, and we need someone who's available. Who knows? Maybe if it's a significant enough injury, maybe you do put him on IR. But either way, that's tough because I think he's had a solid camp, and it would be disappointing to see him get cut because of an injury 3 days before the preseason finale, 5 days before cutdowns. But we'll have to see. Hopefully it's a minor thing and he can get out there. I think Khaleke Hudson's been good. I think if you keep 5 and DeMarco's injury is one that you expect to linger, I think Khaleke Hudson would be the next guy on that list. But I would like to see him kind of show out. Monty Rice, I think, has been really solid in camp. I want to say he led the team in tackles in the preseason opener. So hopefully he can get out there and maybe he can put a name in there. But these guys, I think, have a lot on the line. And then cornerback, it's the last position we'll talk about. When I did my roster projections, every roster projection to this point, I have had 4 cornerbacks on the roster. Now, if I did that again today, which I will do another one probably Friday, I'll probably write it prior to the preseason game and then update it after the preseason game if I have time. But I'm probably going to put an extra cornerback on there, and it's because we still don't have Marshawn Lattimore back, still out with that hip flexor. You at least have to wonder if he's going to be ready to go week 1. And you have to plan for it if he's not. And then Kool-Aid, he's dealing with a knee injury. And while it doesn't sound like it's going to be one that keeps him out of an extended period of time, I don't think you want to mess around with a knee injury. So I think that means you keep one more cornerback, at least, maybe 2, than you initially intended to keep. And if so, who's that going to be? My bet right now would be Rico Payton, because I think he's had a really strong finish to his camp. I think he's struggled. If you asked me to pick the 3 players on this roster that I would cut after the first week of camp, Rico would have been on there. Now, you don't have to cut players after the first week of camp, and I think that's a good thing because Rico has turned things around. And remember, you're talking about a guy who's out of Pittsburgh State, D2 guy. I'm sure that it did take him some time to get up to speed. And now that he is up to speed, I think we've seen a guy really come into his own and really be impressive. Do I want him to start week 1? Absolutely not. But I think that there's a chance he does enough in this game that you keep him around. And then you talk about a guy, Rajon Wright. He's been solid too. Juwan Williams is a guy that I'm curious to see. You don't sign someone this late in the camp unless you have some feeling that they're going to compete for a roster spot or at least a premium practice squad spot. So we'll see. He's a second-round pick. He's 6'3", and he's all of 6'3". Like, I saw him standing next to Paulson and Adebo at practice today, just towered over him. Because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes, these guys play fast and loose with their measurements. But no, he's legit 6'3", and you don't see it a lot at the cornerback position. In a lot of cases because it's tough to move at the as fluidly as you need to at that size. Like Richard Sherman is one of the few examples of a guy who was able to do that. And you have to be physical. You have to get in and out of, you have to transition well. You have to be able to move your hips. And so we'll see. He was a second-round pick by the Patriots in 2019. So there's clearly some level of pedigree there that this team is a fan of. So we'll have to see how that goes. But those are definitely players that, a big game in this week could go a long, long way. And that's true of a lot of these guys. That's true of every player I just named. If they could come out and have a big game in this preseason finale, then you give yourself a chance to, at minimum, land on the practice squad. And we'll see. But all right, let's wrap that up there. One more practice to watch. That's it. One more practice and then no more practice, at least not for the media to watch. We'll get the standard 30-minute open session where we can take attendance and basically watch stretching, and that's it. And then we'll be back to making all of our assessments based off of games and background reporting and whatnot, all that good stuff. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited. This is the time of year where I've watched so much practice and I've become so desensitized to what a football game actually looks like that they start playing and you're like, oh, yeah, that's what a hit is. That's what a hit sounds like. And I'm excited to get on the sideline. I'll be on the sideline Sunday. It'd be good to get back into the Superdome. I'm interested to see what the attendance is like Friday and Sunday, and then we get a week off. If there's any content, any topics, any questions, anything like that you'd like to see us hit in the open week, let me know. We'll obviously do an episode breaking down the roster and who got kept, who got cut, that sort of thing. But we'll have at least one episode. We're just gonna have to figure out a way. We're just gonna have to figure out a topic because it's gonna be something. But until that time, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone who subscribed. Thanks to everyone who reaches out on Twitter, on whatever. I appreciate all of you. Make sure to follow WWL.com for the latest news, notes, and analysis. Steve, myself, and Bobby Aber will be hosting Sports Talk on Friday, 4 to 8 p.m. on WWL. So make sure to check that out. Call in, text, let us know what you think. I always appreciate that. And until the next time, who dat? Go Saints. Be easy, y'all. Hush.